In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city stood a magnificent mansion, a house filled with wealth, power, and luxury. But behind those tall gates lived a woman whose heart had become colder than stone. Her name was Madame Adana Okeke. She had everything money could buy, but there was one thing life had taken away from her many years ago: her child. For 18 long years, she believed her baby daughter had died in a terrible hospital fire. The pain changed her. It hardened her until one day a quiet young girl knocked on her gate asking for work as a maid. Madame Adana looked at the girl and saw nothing but another servant. But what she didn't know was that the girl standing before her was the daughter she lost 18 years ago. And the moment the truth finally came out, everyone was left in shock. Welcome to Olu Beauty African Folktales channel. Here we tell you the way it is. Have you subscribed? If not, oh yeah, run kitty kitty, run kata kata. Subscribe, like, comment and share. Share it with your families and friends. And don't forget to touch the bell button so that you'll be notified each time we put out new video. Oh yeah, grab your popcorn, sit jeje and enjoy yourself. Oh yeah, let's get there. Adanna Okeke was one of the most powerful and feared businesswomen in the city. A widow in her mid 40s, she lived alone in a massive mansion with only her house staff and a few distant relatives occasionally visiting. She had everything money could buy, but was known for her cold heart and motionless eyes. One rainy morning, she interviewed a new maid recommended by the agency, a quiet, beautiful girl named Zara, just 18 years old. There was something about her that felt familiar: her dark eyes, her quiet composure, her hesitant smile. But Adana, ever the pragmatic woman, brushed it off. The morning Zara arrived at the mansion, the sky was grey and heavy with rain. She stood nervously at the large iron gate, holding a small worn out bag that contained everything she owned in the world. Her clothes were simple, her shoes were old, but her eyes carried a quiet strength. Inside the mansion, Madame Adana sat at a long glass dining table reviewing business files. Her assistant walked in and said, "Madam, the maid agency has sent the new girl." Without even looking up, Adana said coldly, "Send her in." Moments later, Zara stepped into the massive living room. Her eyes widened at the beauty of the house. But something strange happened. The place felt familiar, like she had been there before. She slowly walked forward. Adana finally looked up. For a moment, just a moment, their eyes met, and something unexplainable passed between them. But Adana quickly brushed it away. She didn't believe in emotions or memories or fate. "What's your name?" she asked. "Zara, ma'am." Adana nodded and said, "You will clean, cook, wash, and stay out of my way, okay?" "Yes, ma'am," Zara answered. But that night, something happened that would begin to uncover a secret buried for 18 years. While cleaning Adana's bedroom, Zara found a small silver bracelet engraved with a single name, Ziora. The moment she saw it, her heart started beating wildly because in her small bag she carried another bracelet with exact same name. Zara stood frozen in Madame Adana's bedroom, staring at the tiny silver bracelet in her hand. The name engraved on it made her heart pound. Ziora. Her fingers trembled. Slowly, she opened the small bag she always carried with her. From inside, she removed a worn cloth pouch she had kept since childhood. Inside the pouch was another bracelet, the same shape, the same design, and the same name, Ziora. Her breathing became heavy. This can't be a coincidence, she whispered to herself. For as long as Zara could remember, the caretakers at the orphanage had told her a strange story about how she was found. She had been discovered as a baby during a hospital fire. No parents, no family, only a bracelet with her name, Ziora. But when she was adopted by a strict foster family years later, they changed her name to Zara. And from that moment, her past slowly faded away until now, standing in the house of a powerful woman who treated her like nothing, holding a bracelet that matched hers perfectly. Something inside her heart was telling her one terrifying possibility. What if the woman she worked for was actually her mother? But how could that be? And if it was true, why had she never searched for her? Before we continue this shocking story, please, if you are enjoying this African tale so far, please and please like this video and subscribe to the channel and share it with your family and friends and tell me in the comment section, do you think Zara should reveal the truth to Madame Adana or keep the secret? Aya, now let's continue because what happened next was something nobody expected. That same night, while Zara lay awake in the tiny maid's room behind the mansion, Madame Adana sat alone in her large living room. The house was quiet, but her mind was not. Her eyes slowly moved toward an old framed photograph on the wall, a photograph she rarely allowed anyone to see. It showed a young woman smiling with joy, holding a newborn baby wrapped in white clothes. That woman was Adana, and the baby in her arms was her daughter, Ziora. 18 years earlier, that baby had been the center of her entire world. Adana had waited years for a child, years of prayers, years of tears. Then finally, Ziora was born. She was beautiful, perfect, a tiny miracle. But just 3 days later, tragedy struck. Late at night, a terrible fire broke out in the hospital nursery. Smoke filled the building. Doctors and nurses rushed everywhere in panic. Babies were moved. People screamed. Chaos consumed the hospital. When the fire was finally controlled, Adana received the worst news of her life. Her baby, her baby girl, had died. Her body had never been found. But the hospital insisted the flames were too strong. There was nothing left. That moment destroyed Adana's heart forever. She stopped trusting people. She stopped believing in happiness. And slowly, the loving young mother she once was turned into the cold, ruthless woman everyone feared today. But someone else in the house had started noticing strange things. Madame Adana's niece, Linda. Linda had been living in the mansion for several years. Beautiful, elegant, but deep inside, she was greedy and ambitious. She knew that one day, when Adana died, most of her wealth would likely go to her. But recently, she had noticed something unsettling. Adana had started watching the new maid more closely, and Zara seemed unusually curious about the house. Linda didn't like it, not one bit. One afternoon, she secretly followed Zara down the hallway, and what she heard next made her heart skip. Zara was on the phone, speaking softly, and said, "I think I found something. The bracelet matches exactly. The nurse said I was rescued during the fire." Linda's eyes widened. Fire? Bracelets? Rescued? Suddenly, the truth began forming in her mind. And if that truth became known, everything Linda hoped to inherit would disappear. She clenched her fist and whispered to herself and said, "This girl must never reveal the truth. Never." Days passed, but Zara could no longer ignore the growing questions in her heart. She needed proof. One morning, while cleaning Madame Adana's bathroom, she noticed a toothbrush on the sink. An idea suddenly came to her mind. It was risky, but it might reveal the truth. With the help of the kind mansion driver, Chuka, Zara secretly took a sample from the toothbrush. They sent it to a laboratory for testing. A DNA test. Days turned into weeks, and every night Zara prayed quietly, not knowing whether she wanted the truth or feared it. Finally, the results arrived. She sat with Chuka in a small clinic office. The doctor opened the envelope slowly, then looked at Zara with wide eyes and said, "Are you sure you want to see this?" Zara nodded nervously. The doctor turned the paper toward her, and the words she saw made her entire body go numb. Possibility of biological relationship 99.9%. Zara gasped. Tears flooded her eyes. It was true. Madame Adana, the woman who insulted her every day, was her mother. But before Zara could reveal the truth, someone else had already discovered the secret, and what that person did next would change everyone's lives forever. Zara stared at the DNA report with trembling hands, her eyes blurred with tears. For years, she had wondered where she came from, who her parents were, and why she had been abandoned. And now, the truth was finally before her. The woman who shouted at her every morning, the woman who treated her like she was invisible, the woman who called her just a maid, was her mother, her real mother. Zara pressed the paper against her chest and cried silently. But while she sat there trying to gather the courage to face Madame Adana, someone else was already planning to destroy everything. Linda, Adana's niece. Linda had secretly followed Zara that afternoon. From behind a door, she watched Zara holding the documents. And when Zara left the room briefly, Linda quietly stepped inside. Her eyes scanned the paper. Then suddenly she froze. Her heart began racing because written clearly on the page were the words Mother Adana Okeke, Child Zora Okeke. Linda's face slowly twisted with anger. "So it's true," she whispered. For years, she had believed the entire fortune of the Okeke empire would one day become hers. But if Zara was truly Adana's daughter, then everything would belong to her instead. Linda clenched the paper tightly. Her mind had already made a decision. This truth must never come out. The next morning, before Zara could gather the courage to speak to Madame Adana, Linda had already made her own move. She walked into Adana's office, pretending to be upset. Auntie, we have a serious problem here. Oh." Adana looked up from her laptop and said, "What is it, Linda?" Linda sighed dramatically and said, "I didn't want to believe it, oh, but I caught the maid stealing from your room. Can you imagine that?" Adana's expression hardened instantly. "What?" she said. Linda nodded sadly and said, "I even saw her going through your personal documents. I think she's trying to blackmail you." Oh." Without asking a single question, Adana stood up angrily. "Call her here immediately," she said. Minutes later, Zara walked into the office. She was nervous, but she was finally ready to speak. Before she could say a word, Adana slammed her hand on the table and said, "How dare you witch?" Zara jumped in shock and said, "Ma'am, you ungrateful girl," Adana shouted. "I gave you a place to stay, and this is how you repay me? By stealing?" Zara's eyes widened. "Stealing? No, ma'am. I. But before she could finish, Adana raised her hand and slapped her hard. The sound echoed across the room. Tears instantly filled Zara's eyes. She tried to explain. "I wasn't stealing. I just needed to tell you something very important." "I don't want to hear it," Adana snapped. "Get out of my house right now." Zara stood there, frozen, her heart breaking. The words she had prepared to say, "I am your daughter," remained trapped in her throat. Slowly, she turned and walked toward the door. And as she stepped outside the mansion, her tears began to fall. She had finally found her mother, but her mother had just thrown her away. 3 days passed. The mansion felt unusually quiet. Even Madame Adana began to notice it. Something felt missing. She tried to focus on work, but strangely, her mind kept drifting back to the young maid she had fired. The way Zara looked at her sometimes, the sadness in her eyes, it was unsettling. That evening, Adana opened her private safe to retrieve some important files, but as she searched through the documents, her fingers suddenly touched an envelope she did not remember placing there. She frowned, then slowly opened it. Inside was a copy of the DNA test result. Her eyes scanned the page, then suddenly stopped. The color drained from her face. She read the words again and again and again. Her heart started beating wildly. "Impossible!" Her voice was barely a whisper. The report clearly stated biological match 99.9%. The name on the page made her hands shake. Ziora Okeke, her daughter, alive? Her mind raced back to Zara's face. The same eyes, the same quiet smile, the same strange feeling she had ignored the first day they met. Realization struck her like lightning. The girl she had just thrown out of her house was her own child, her baby. The daughter she believed had died 18 years ago. Adana collapsed into the chair. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered in disbelief, "What have I done? Oh no, what have I done?" By the time Madame Adana finally realized the truth, Zara was already gone, and the journey she had started would soon place her life in terrible danger. After leaving the mansion, Zara wandered through the city with nowhere to go. Her heart was heavy with pain. Not only had she lost the chance to reconnect with her mother, she was also carrying another secret, one that even Adana did not know. Zara was pregnant. Her boyfriend David had abandoned her months earlier when he learned she worked as a maid. Now she was alone, hungry, and heartbroken. One evening, As she sat on a bench crying quietly, an elderly woman approached her. The woman's name was Mama Ngozi. She owned a small roadside food store. After hearing Zara's story, Mama Ngozi shook her head sadly and said, "My daughter, the world can be cruel, but God never abandons his children, okay?" She offered Zara a small room behind her shop, and for the first time in days, Zara felt a tiny spark of hope. But far away at the mansion, Madame Adana had already begun a desperate search, and when she finally finds Zara again, the truth will explode in a way no one could imagine. Madame Adana sat alone in her office long after everyone in the house had gone to bed. The DNA report still lay open on her desk. Her hands trembled as she stared at the name written clearly on the paper: Ziora Okeke, her daughter, alive. For 18 years, she had mourned a child she believed was gone forever. 18 years of pain, 18 years of loneliness. And when fate finally brought her daughter back into her life, she had treated her like a servant. Worse still, she had slapped her. Adana covered her face with both hands as guilt crushed her heart. "How could I not see it?" she whispered. "The eyes, the smile, oh my God." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but regret alone could not change what had already happened. She stood up suddenly and grabbed her phone. "Chuka," she said when the driver answered, "I need you to find Zara, okay? Look for her. Find her for me." Chuka hesitated and said, "Madam, she left 3 days ago." "I know," Adana said desperately, "but she is my daughter." There was silence on the phone. Then Chuka spoke slowly and said, "I knew something about her felt special. I knew that." Adana closed her eyes and said, "Please help me find her. Help me find her before it is too late, please." While Adana began searching for Zara across the city, Linda was growing increasingly nervous. She had destroyed the original DNA report, but she did not know that Adana had found another copy. For days, she watched her aunt carefully, and something felt wrong. Adana was no longer angry. Instead, she looked worried, restless. One evening, Linda overheard Adana speaking on the phone, and she said, "I don't care how long it takes. Find the girl for me, please." Linda's heart skipped. Panic spread through her chest. If Zara returned to the mansion, everything would be exposed. And when Adana discovered the lies Linda had told, she would lose everything. Linda clenched her fist and said, "No," she muttered under her breath. "That girl must never come back to this house. Never, not when I'm alive." Before we continue this shocking story, if you are enjoying this African tales so far, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with your families and friends and tell me in the comment section who among Madam Adana and Linda who will first find Zara, and what do you think Linda will do to Zara when she found her?